Alrighty.
Good evening. You are definitely listening live to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob, of course, broadcasting to you in the Xtreme Studios, just west of the of Orlando, Florida. All I keep hearing is already looping in the background. Of
Oh
course, that
no.
means one thing that's good is I have RDV from the Great Midwest. You are there, I take it, sir.
I am here, sir. But
All
I'm
right,
not
so
I'm not in Miami where you are.
you're not. It was a mild 50 something degrees today for a low. It was actually quite pleasant and dry here in Central Florida. And I have to say that's a very astute observation you have there, sir, because in tonight's movie Thunderdome, something we all take very seriously. It's a situation where there's no winners, there's no trophy participations, there's none of that going on. It's all about who survives. And right now we have from 1983 and our matchup for Sunday night's 10 movies of 1983. We have a preview, and that's of course Return of the Jedi, which I
Hmm.
think arguably everyone would say you have to start with that one. So then our thinking is what would be the strongest movie that might have a chance of knocking it off its throne? And I think we debated long and hard about it because there's a lot of nice stuff this year, right? But
Yes.
we went out with the violent one. And hey, for all you Color Night fans, huh? I got ridiculed backstage by these two guys by that movie, and I love it. I told you guys I did, and it's one of our best videos of all time. This is the movie Brian De Palma did before that, Scarface, and we're going to put that up against Return of the Jedi. So I want to hand it over to you as people are filing in RDV, so you can give us our initial thoughts on this matchup before we start
All
diving
right.
in.
Obviously, any movie you put up against Star Wars is the bigger cult following, which
Without
is which
question.
is which is crazy. Because Star Wars, I think, is a little bit more overrated than it's actually good. Not to saying that it's not a good movie. This is the third movie. This is the one with the damn
The
teddy bears.
Ewoks. Yeah.
Yeah, this is where it's like, ooh, we're on to the threequel.
It doesn't have those horrific looking things from Dark Crystal that I confuse with Disney shit. So it might have been
No,
better if it did and was a little more violent that way, but who knows?
honestly, when I look at Star Wars and I see the little, you see the left corner of a screen, there's the little pig guy with the axe. I thought that was Disney at first with the puppets, you know.
Hmm.
I wouldn't be surprised if Jim Henson's puppets or thing was involved with this, or I don't know. But anyway, like it is when it comes to Return of the Jedi, the strongest part for me for all these three movies is the fact that it's Harrison Ford. Harrison Ford carries the movies, his little scenes. Luke Skywalker is just like C-3PO, where can he be? You know, all that bullshit. Honestly, the special effects are better than most of the crew or most of the cast.
Hmm.
Uh, do like Carrie Fisher. I do like Harrison Ford. So Luke Skywalker being the main guy and just be distraught because now he has to fight against his father, and then team up with his father Dan and kill the Emperor by basically just kangaroo kicking him down this
That's
like
true.
shaft endless cliff, just like and then he's like, I have ultimate power, and then he has ultimate power as he falls to his death. It was kind of a weak ending for me. But we were also talking about Scarface here. Scarface, I thought honestly because I can't remember where the other pick was. It was either Scarface or something else, but Scarface for me is that has a huge cult following. Just the whole some would argue that's actually even Al Pacino's one of his major roles, if
Oh,
not
absolutely.
down the best role
Oh
he's done.
yeah.
A man who created himself, brought him up for nothing. He's a similar guy coming over from Cuba, coming into Florida. They kind of got smuggled over here, and now he discovers like he wants to be the top guy. He's tired of being the little pusher. He wants to basically work his way up the ladder. So he wants to cut out the middleman. He's like, I could do it better if I can make you more money. And there's a scene here in the very opening where he goes in there. He's about to be killed by a guy with a chainsaw, and then instead he kills the guy with the chainsaw. I thought that was like, oh, it's really intense. But just the whole thing. When it comes to Scarface, people think of like, oh, the end scene. Say hello to my little friend, and he's just got the big giant gun and just shooting everything and just wasting all these bullets just to die at the end.
And the amount of coke.
The amount of coke, yes, the amount of coke he's on his desk. Uh, Honestly, um, it's more of a moralistic story. It's a moral as far as it's there is a very moral lesson to this. You know, greed will only take you so far, and then you'll like it's basically you'll end up paying for it in the end.
Yeah,
It never
prove
ends well.
yourself. Yeah.
Even though like we for those who played Grand Theft Auto Vice City, it's kind of a similar situation with this. You know, I love the fact that this is very 80s movies, as far as 80s goes. Miami Vice deals with a lot of these kind of characters like this, the wannabe gangsters, and honestly, when it comes Al Pacino was very intimidating in this movie. But and even towards the end, you could say he's not really much of a likable guy. He's not a guy you want to aspire to be, but he's a guy that basically doesn't take crap from others. But he's still a very much a disgusting kind of person. The way he treats Michelle Pfeiffer in this, especially towards the end, she's kind of like she was with this other guy, but then he kills the other guy and then now you're my wife, and like he doesn't care anything about. She says in the movie, you only care about yourself, and it is true. He gets so wrapped up, and he's so nervous about people trying to bump him off. But if anything, though, the whole movie is a roller coaster of emotions. I love it. Just the music, push it to the limit. Every time I hear that song, I get pumped up. Like, oh, that's freaking Scarface. I know. And honestly, this makes me want to go watch Miami Vice 2 as well. It's like I'm just waiting for somebody to be in a speedboat chase.
Have you seen Scarface up to this point?
Oh yeah, I saw it a long time ago. I even played the video game back in the day, bro.
Okay. Yeah.
Teachers,
I told you this would remind you of Miami Vice because I know I think that's probably a first watch for you, the TV show, and it definitely's got a lot of the Miami scene and vibes for it. It's like, fuck yeah, that's good stuff.
My friend was telling me how his teacher didn't like the fact that he's like like basically he was praising Tommy or his name is Tony Montana. He's like, and she's like, he's a horrible person. Yes, but he's a made man.
Well, we're going to come back to that idea because I think that's fairly obvious that a lot of people get past the gimmicky stuff. Maranya had put a few comments in chat. I wanted to kind of repivot onto Return of the Jedi because she made the comment. I thought this was very interesting. I first of all, let me go back to the very beginning. I do agree with you. I think Star Wars is overrated as a franchise. I understand that it's gotten a lot of goodwill, and a second and possibly third generation of people have embraced it, and I get it. I understand it. That doesn't mean that what we're saying is not true. Both things can be. I do think that after the first one, by the time the second one came and it was really tight, that kind of was like the mature one in that it was, I think, an improvement over the original movie. But the original did open your eyes to this whole universe, and it had to do well. So it's tough for me because in a way I kind of feel like there was no real tension in this third one. And to Maranya's point about being the weakest of the third, I can totally see that as a very solid armor. I think most people would put the second one as the best, then the first one, and then the third, which is kind of the order I think I would go into. Because I remember when I saw this, I went, okay, Luke's now like the Master Jedi. Okay, that's cool, whatever. It didn't mean anything to me. It was just sort of there. You're right, Han Solo's the same for the most part. You wanted to see him kind of come back and all that, and you kind of knew that he would, but it was a nice way to end the second movie with him. And then ending the second movie on a grim note was nice. You knew that they were going to win, so that was anticlimactic. And then you throw in all these Ewoks, and you're like, why is there kid shit in here? You know, you were a kid when you watched the first movie. 6 years have gone by, and now you're like, I wanted to get more mature.
I feel like the reason this movie gets a lot of goodwill is because we get Slave Leia. Now Carrie Fisher, who's hot in this. Honestly, Han Solo's character is fun in this.
He is.
I don't
understand love for Carrie Fisher. I don't. She's cute here, but she's like sister cute rather than my sister's girlfriend who I'd like to bang cute. Even in the same. I'm just going to go out there and say it.
I wouldn't say sister cute. I don't look at girls and be like, yeah, she's cute like my sister.
No, my sister's friend. They
they
usually have one. You're like, hey, can you hook me up with your sister? Do you know anybody? That sort of thing. And this, it's just pimping her out like that. Just I
will say this: the whole outfit with Carrie Fisher was always awkward for me too. I was like, this is like overkill.
It
It's
doesn't
just kind
match our personality in the movies.
it's like sex trafficking. That's what it reminded me of a little bit.
It's not like the Green Dancing Girl or any
And
of the Green
well,
Aliens Kirk banged back in the original TV show where they had some sexuality to them.
it
Carrie
was
Fisher was supposed to be a nice, wholesome character. We've been
yeah.
using wholesome a lot lately.
She's here next door. And then putting her into this was kind of it wasn't really meant to make like, hey, like, she's hot, but nerds where they are, they're like, oh my gosh, she's a babe and she's all fit. Now I gotta say though, it did start a trend because there are guys who have girlfriends who do the good cosplay and they can pull it off. They look better than Carrie Fisher, so they like. I'll give Carrie Fisher a nod for that, George Lucas, but as far as the whole thing was supposed to, it was, I guess, my opinion when I watched these movies is that her in the outfit, she's a slave of this green, disgusting slug, and
Yeah.
which I don't even know why he'd even want her in the outfit like that. I guess maybe to degrade her because I don't think he's sexually attracted to her whatsoever. I don't think he could even do anything with these people.
Right.
I don't even want to think about that. Ugh. But yeah, apart from that, though, like I said, Star Wars, it's being able to control stuff with the Force, the pew pew guns, the stormtroopers, the lightsabers, be able to cut through butter. Um, I mean, it's just like there were some jokes, and a lot of the jokes were Han Solo.
Hmm.
I think it's this one or is it the second or third? I was getting confused where he runs in storming, and then he goes to save her, and then all of a sudden he's basically he has to turn around because he's being chased by the stormtroopers. So he's outgunned. I can't
It
remember.
might have been in both.
Yeah, I might have both, but I said Harrison Ford was the main actor as far as I say of these movies. And honestly, that is still a mark on it as far as for me. Now there are people who love these movies because it's a space opera. I do love the ships. I do love them, the Millennium Falcon. I do like the X-wings. The special effects they did for these was really cool when they're in space. So I did like that. Darth Vader is totally a badass, menacing. But I mean, like, honestly though, I can understand as a kid why you'd be so enamored with this. Now, if you're in your late 20s, I don't know 30s if you would this would really be
If
like,
you moved out of your parents' house.
even if you moved to your parents' house, like I said, like it's just a point where it's like, would you be watching this or would you be watching Scarface or would you be watching, like I'm just trying to think of what else was out, other movies on this time. And it's just like I'd be more pumped up to watch Indiana Jones than watch any of the Star Wars movies these days. The first
Agreed.
series of Arts Lark.
Absolutely.
It just feels like it's more entertaining to me. Now, if Pixel's here, Pixel would be having a hissy fit.
Is he a big Star Wars nerd?
He is a Star Wars nerd.
Okay, I did not know that. I know he's at
which is
Megaton.
okay.
He's gonna give
That's
us
his
update on
thing.
that.
I don't know. It's just like these days, if I'm gonna play anything Star Wars, I play a Star Wars video game. Something like that. Something I can interact with.
Well, one thing that George Lucas I like about him, and when I went back and looked at what he was involved in as far as writing and directing, and he doesn't have nearly as much as you think he does. But what he did was he realized this was a property, and even though it had gotten big, Morania had mentioned Chad a lot of little factoids about it, which some I was unaware of.
They
But
changed,
I was keenly aware of here in the South. We had was it the Wonder Bread? You'd go get that. They would have a card in there, like a picture from the movie, and there was like I don't know 78 of them or whatever. It was a big deal to collect them and trade them and stuff. And so to me as a kid, it wasn't so much the Magic Green, the cereal box kind of thing that you look for. It was all about the bread and stuff. And for me, the thing that really hit critical mass in terms of merchandising was the first Star Wars movie. And I do not hold that against Star Wars, but that's why I go to Star Wars, was it 77, as the franchise movie. And I know some people will say Jaws, but in terms of the marketing as a kid, that's all I remember. Star Wars this, Star Wars that,
huge.
underwear. Now, lunchboxes were huge, right? When I was in elementary school, you had the Hardy Boys lunchboxes, the tin ones that you could crack over somebody's skull if they with everything, cartoons, adult stuff, Star Wars stuff. That was kind of cool. But by the time this third one came around, it's like I could sincerely ask this. The second movie was an improvement. You saw growth in the characters. yes, you could argue there were growth of characters there, but this third one's really just what we like to call the third act. It's the resolution. It's just it's not really development
It's the
or anything else.
climax. Yep.
Yeah, and that's okay, I guess, but a lot of times for me personally, story-wise, that's the least interesting thing because,
And
it's there's not much you have to overcome. You're doing the overcoming. And the other point I want to make about George Lucas, which I think is far more important, is forgetting the movie. He'll readily admit that, and I've mentioned this before for years, and the storytelling, the whole idea of
mhm,
Joseph Campbell and the man's hero's journey, as it's called, and how it shows up in different things. He obviously based this off of several things, which if you analyze, it's pretty there. And I did not know that what the fight scenes that, like Marani's mentioning, he based off like
yeah.
fight things from that. But he was very good at not just the story and the directing, but the sound bit. I believe he created Industrial Light and Magic. I'm not a big Star Wars nerd, so don't hold me to this. But I remember as a guy, when computers were just starting to get into classrooms, believe it or not, that it was a big deal if there was a game made by Lucasfilm or Arts or like that going into the 90s and whatnot. So he was so smart as a business guy, putting it all together as intellectual property. I give him props for that. Even if the content to me it's not as great as what everybody thinks, but it really is almost to me the gold standard of what it means to create an intellectual property. Not stuff that had been around already 50, 75 years like Lord of the Rings that would become
Hmm.
movie properties, but totally on your own. I give him a lot of props for that. So I'm trying to pump up Return of the Jedi as best I can here because I agree with you in
Well,
everything you're saying. If you're an adult, why would you watch this movie over
no.
Scarface?
Like I said, I'm close. I'm almost 40 years old. If this would have came out now, I probably be like, oh, I'll watch it later. And this is saying we live in a world, saying based off of, let's say, like 20 years, or basically, because right now everybody's really, like, really scared to watch a movie because you're afraid it's going to be woke, or it's going to be or just plain just stupid. Um, Honestly, imagine in a perfect society, you can go see a movie and a lot of great movies coming out and you're happy. So this comes out and you're like, okay, what is this now? Is this like is this these seems it's not, it doesn't seem like it's really aimed at 5-year-olds, like if you turn on like Disney Junior or something like that. But it does come off like as as not, I don't want to say I don't want to say immature, because that's an insult. There's actually people who like the stuff, but
Right.
it does keep as adolescence, as far
Yeah.
as this, and this would be like your teens, and honestly, which I'm not sure if these were books first, right, Marania? I can't remember.
No.
I thought they were books first, and then
Things would get novelized
okay,
as an income stream
because
afterwards. So there's
because
definitely books on here, right? But
so
usually that would come out first after the
my
script.
point is, though, is that the Star Wars movies, I always seemed like these probably would serve more better as books than as movies. Um, I don't know. Like I said, like, usually, because there are a lot of people who like this, but I mean, these just comes off. It's like reading like like when they did like the based off of Halo, the game, video games, they were doing graphic novelizations, like, just books. And I was like, really, you're gonna do books? I guess so. I mean, I don't know. It's like we already had Star Trek at this point before this. Star
Right.
Wars comes around. Star Wars is like the kids version, I guess, for Star Trek. Because Star Trek, I guess, was aimed towards more adults. I'm like, at least I'm speculating here because I don't really know much about early Star Trek. I guess there was a lot of teens that did love Star Trek,
Star
but
Trek actually had a bit of a cult following, and most people would say, if they're fans of the original series, that about a third of the episodes are absolutely phenomenally incredible. And I'm not even talking about set pieces and how crappy you look. I'm talking in terms of the writing and the concepts.
yeah,
A third were okay, and a third were just trash. And a lot of it had to do with the writing and the show running of it, with how popular Shatner was, becoming. You always hear with Shatner that he's a dick and nobody liked him.
yeah.
And I've heard that ever since Star Trek. I've heard that all the way through the 70s and 80s, TJ Hooker and this and that. So I don't know if that's really true or not. And it sounds like a lot of bitter, angry people because it was a thing that just wouldn't die. But there was some great writing because of some of the scripts on the original series were by all these great writers of the hardcore science fiction stuff in there. And again, there's some phenomenal episodes of Star Trek. I would say, hey, this is as good as anything you're going to find in terms of science fiction for 1 hour of TV. I mean, we haven't reviewed that here yet on Extreme TV, and it's always been on our short list because there's some really good stuff. But it's gotten Scarfaced over the years, where people just think of Kirk overacting and the haminess of some of the things, but there's just some great ideas and stuff in there, and Star Trek had a lot of them that really
Yep.
hadn't existed yet. Maybe you saw some interesting concepts in like the Outer Limits or Twilight Zone and stuff there too,
Mhm.
but you had to be a fan of that for that at the time.
Yeah. Mariah's saying that she's a Trek fan, and when it came to Star Wars and all, she's looking for a rebrand of Star Trek.
Oh,
Uh,
that's an
'cause,
interesting
yeah,
thought.
well, Star Trek's out first. Yeah, I imagine you see Star Wars, it's like, wait, are they trying to compete with Star Trek? I mean, obviously, I'd say yes. Um,
I would say no, because at the time, if you were into movies for the most part, you did not do TV. You were one or the other. And eventually, I mean, you would have crossover, especially if you were an older actor or actress. And definitely, I would say the 70s, and any of the older people in here would probably correct me. I've seen a lot of 70s TV,
yeah,
but that
but
was a young kid. That's when you would start having guest stars on stuff. And like someone like Ricardo Montalban could be really popular on Fantasy Island in the 70s, going to the 80s. But he'd already been established at that time. So it was
TV's.
more accepting of people to get onto television later, but they were considered two totally separate mediums and not written the same way.
I feel like movies are more important than TV. I mean, obviously there are certain TV shows that we love, we have nostalgia for, but I mean, like, you get a movie deal. That's a big thing, you know.
Hmm.
TV is kind of, even until today. TV is kind of like, unless you're a recurring role going for like Modern Family, going for like 8 or 9 seasons, or how many the show went for, you know, that's nothing. You just, I was a guest or on the show. Okay,
Right.
that's great. But if you were doing a movie, that's 2 hours. That's a lot more commitment. To release, because I don't know. It just feels like movies are more of a big deal these days.
Yeah, one of the things I'll give
The movie
Shatner
star
credit
compared to the TV
for
star.
that he was able to do, and you and I years ago did a very small independent film. He did film here in the west side of Central Florida called Impulse, where he plays a gigolo
Oh,
serial killer, and it
hey,
was
little girl, want to ride?
yeah, it was really phenomenal and really creepy. And he's
Yeah.
he's a Shakespearean trained actor. He started off doing like a lot of people Shakespeare and other stuff like that. I mean, you could talk about his style, and everyone likes to demean it. And he's in his 90s now. He still has juice. But again, he starred in a lot of different shows. I always mention T.J. Hooker. He's done other things. He's done movies. He's
Hmm.
written shows. He wrote a couple books called Tech War. There's a tech world kind of based like Star Trek. And I remember in the early 90s when he kind of was reinventing himself that way, and of course he'd be on Boston Legal and other things. That's when the vocal people like George Takei and others would kind of bitch about him, and it's like he still made himself relevant and adjusted with the times to do stuff. And I'm not going to say the content was always great or not,
Hmm.
but he was a producer, and I think the fact that he would do those things, I mean, I've always been envious of him. And I've never been a starstruck person,
Yeah,
so I don't look to go
like
get autographs and all that stuff. But some people say he's a jerk when you go to Comic Cons or Mega Cons. Some people say he's great.
I
I really don't know the guy that
don't
way.
know, really don't care. I'm not going to
Yeah,
meet the guy. I'm going.
I
I'm
just
watching the
know that
show or the
when I look at
movie.
him and he's in his 80s, and he's playing in a couple episodes
Yeah,
of Haven, and he's
yeah,
believable, and he's in his, I
yeah.
think, probably around 90 now, and he still wants to do stuff. I admire that.
As long as you can act still and do your stuff, that's I
Yeah,
care. Like it says, like and that's the thing. We've become so focused on what the celebrities say outside the movies. I don't give a shit what they say, as long as you actually don't put it into the movie. You know,
yeah.
just go there, read your lines, and then fucking move on.
Well,
Really?
the thing with
It's,
the Star
yeah,
Trek that I want to point out, as
yeah,
much as I love the original show, how is it relevant? Return of the Jedi's, kind of again, like you mentioned, the climax. The
yeah.
original Star Trek was a very progressive show. I think it's very clear if we wanted to really analyze it. It's got a strong communist angle to it,
Well,
Prime Directive, and
it's
but it's not really about that. The other shows afterwards would become that, I think, more openly.
it's.
But
I would
the
say it's.
diversity of it and how they would approach things and the way they work together as a group is what I think most people remember, with Kurt being, the anchor of that. But when you go into something like Scarface, because I was using this as a transition, I'm going to go back to a comment you made earlier, because I totally agree with it. You can go, oh, this is just another 1980s cocaine drug movie or whatever like that.
Mhm.
No, it's not. It's a character movie. And even though you said that he's basically a not a likable guy and a redeeming guy, he is
Mhm.
self-made. He's got a lot of characteristics that self-made people have. He may not have soft skills that some people were professed that you'd want to have, but the bottom line is he did the stuff
Well,
that he needed to do to be successful. He found out what it was. He was willing to pay the price so he could do it. So I think in a way that's very
it's
something you
kind
could admire out of somebody. Now you may not like his approach, you may not like the way he treated
no.
the women's life, but they were there with him with it, and they chose to be
Yes,
there. They're
yes.
adults.
And
Yeah,
honestly, I was just thinking about this now. It's like, this is we saw how the way this guy ends this movie. We watched Breaking Bad. It's the same thing. It just shows
yeah.
it. If you're a criminal, eventually you pay for it at the end. No one walks away from this kind of life. You walk away when you're dead. And honestly, I love the fact that it's like it's not this movie doesn't glorify criminals. It
I don't
shows
think it does.
no, and I hate that when you see here like teachers, stupid at the public schools, you're like, oh, it's a horrible movie. It's glorifying criminals and those are same idiots. They'll say the same shit about Breaking Bad. Oh, it's glorifying. I liked Walter White, but Walter White suffered the same problem.
Yeah.
You become too obsessed with this to the point where it's a bad life.
It shows the danger of not being a complete,
Yeah,
fully functional adult. It shows what it takes to be really, really good at one thing. And I think we mentioned this Sunday night. We were reviewing 10 movies from 1982, and one of the
hmm
runner-ups was, I think, Personal Best, where we talked about what it's
yes,
like to look at somebody and how hard it is to be successful at something, even if you're very, very, really gifted in it. So I look at like YouTube today, and I see tons of people that can art, they can draw, but that's only one part of the skill set in being successful. YouTube's a platform.
uh,
It's you don't make money by being on YouTube. You make money because you've got a skill and using YouTube as a platform to introduce it so people can filter it out. But when you expose it to everybody out there, the entire quality of it goes down just by nature. That's the law of
yeah.
numbers.
I
And
want to point out something, Marania. This has nothing to do with Untouchables. She's talking about Scarface Untouchables, and he's currently irredeemable in that. And this has nothing. It's a totally different character. This is set in the '80s. It's nothing to do with that stuff. This is basically a guy who basically worked. He's a Cuban
I think
immigrant.
if I remember correctly, because there was a big, so Cuban obviously went communism and went to shit, in the late 50s, early 60s, right?
Yeah,
And so there was a couple very big boatloads of people that came over from Cuba to South Florida,
yeah.
and they came over. And I'm speaking in generalities here. I'm a Florida native here, in Central Florida. I've seen it change over the years. I've been to all parts of Florida. I know it very well, and I've seen how things have changed, and things do change. However, even today, the original Cubans that came over were very attracted to the American ideal of you can make something of yourself here with
Yes.
freedom, and that's where a lot of immigrants came from. And I'm not in no way making a commentary about what's currently going on and all that. I will simply say that most Cubans who came over, we had a Cuban family doctor, believe it or not, that would come to the house, and that was
hmm
one of the last family doctor types that ever existed. And I know that several of them that I worked with, one or two actually today in the private sector, where we would talk about the old days and tell stories, and that was their driving force. They said, we wanted to get out of Cuba, but we knew we could make it in America. We just needed to allow ourselves a chance. And
Yep.
so, in a way, he's one of these guys that came over. Now, I think he was a two-bit thug. And here's the thing: when
Yeah.
when you
Yeah.
live in the hood, bottom line is it's a resource thing. You can talk about whether you deserve it or not. I'm not getting into all that. But if you don't have resources, you can't do anything. He came over to the United States, saw an opportunity. He used the one guy, and the one guy allowed himself to be used, and that's a
Yeah.
fault that he had in here. He allowed himself to get played. He wasn't strong enough
Yep.
because he approved of his all the attention he was getting. Right now, it was his downfall. So this
hmm
movie, like I say, it's focusing on those traits you need to be ultra successful. Because when you look at this film, the only people that are ultra successful are the people that have these traits. You can even argue that maybe she's a successful female in here, but she's got these self-destructive traits too, and she's with them, right?
Yeah. She smokes
And
cigarettes. She drinks something though, and then
yeah,
she stays with him. But then
yeah,
again, I almost kind of feel like she kind of like she's at that point where she's afraid to leave him because he might kill her. So she's kind
that
of like
weak sauce,
so
but
she
it's
stays.
there.
I don't know. It just like I said, everybody in that movie, there really is no one that's very likable. Maybe you could maybe argue his sister though, maybe. But then
Yeah,
his sister was kind of like she was a druggie too, and then and like I said, like it's just like
Oh, usually no.
Everybody, yeah, I said like when drugs are involved, it's a bad scene. So if you watch listen to John Johnson, listen to what's his name?
Well, Michael Thomas, yeah.
Crockett will
Okay,
tell
yeah,
you it's a bad scene. You don't want They're bad people. You don't want to get involved because it's you won't get alive. And
yeah.
honestly, this is the '80s or almost the mid '80s. This is '83, and it was like especially South Florida there, little Cuba, you know, some of those all the Miami Strip. It's always been crime over there, and then now they got these guys who are doing the high profile deals, shipping in cocaine from Colombia or
Hmm.
Cuba, and coming in here, and then having to try and distribute it, and then also you got people who are the gangs that are upset. They want to, and there's always someone that wants to rise up the ranks and take over. He got lazy and he allowed himself to basically be to overtaken.
Yeah.
And he
You got
basically,
fat.
yeah, he became a fat cat. Um, now, the major difference between these two movies is the one on the right of me, Scarface, is more of an adult movie made by Oliver Stone, where the one on the left is a popcorn movie. And that's I've always looked at Star Wars. Star Wars is a popcorn film.
Yeah.
You don't have to put any serious thought into it. You just got to watch. You're watching the school effects. You're watching the jokes. Where Scarface, I said, look on the right. Now, I'm not going to say that one's better than the other. It's up to you guys to decide which ones you like the most. But when it came to Scarface, and I love the '80s. Just watching everything, the club scene. He's like, "You want to dance? I like dancing too." It's like there's a little jokes in there. Um, I think this is Al Pacino's best movie. You know, uh, and I hear Jay had said he didn't like it because he think that he overacted. Actually, no. I think he played it well because he's that type of character where these guys think they're hot shit. You know, and if you don't like it, they're a goon.
I
They're
cannot tell you for decades how, especially people from up north or whatever like that, when you start talking movies and all that, hey, you like Scarface? Yeah. And it wasn't say hello to my friend, and they'd all be doing stuff, and they'd talk like him. And I always wondered,
talking to
John
me.
Boyd's character in that snake movie Anaconda, where he's got
Yeah.
that, where he's pulling his lips down on both sides, really horrible. That always reminds
Yeah.
me of Scarface, right?
Yep.
And I think he's very intense in here. I like him a lot. His assistant guy, who's a goof, I think is kind of funny. They make a nice little buddy tandem. He's like your comic relief, but he's an intense guy,
Well,
and I appreciate that.
I think his friend's actually name is Manny, if I remember it
Yeah, and he's
correctly.
an
Yeah.
achiever, right?
Yeah.
So it's the problem is if you don't have an end game, and you plan the work and then you work the plan. You have a plan B because when shit goes down, you got to figure it out. You got to say, okay, this is when I'm willing to cut it. The problem is when you go to make your plan, you don't know what's realistic. So by the time you get there, you don't know. And I liken it to that old fairy tale that people like to gloss over, and it's a big problem that happened in the 80s with how nice movies were. Is that you take marriage,
Yeah.
for example, happily ever after. Well, what does that mean? You get married, boom, all of a sudden you got a white picket fence and kids and everything's fine.
No, you got to
No, you
work at
still
it.
have to go to work. You still have to deal with assholes there. It doesn't matter what decade you're in or this and that. And it's
Yeah.
the thing with Scarface is it strips all that Americana stuff aside and says, hey, the one thing that can be true is this, but it is consuming. And in the 80s, people wanted to achieve and they had the ability to do it, and especially after the decade of 70s and all the bad stuff that happened there in the 80s. Like I've always said, there's this glimmer of hope, and that produced, I think, two ways that people would think. One would be the Scarface, hey, this is bullshit, the whole alpha male
Right.
kind of thing. And then you have the everything's nice, everything's wonderful, and we'll just philosophize on a few simple things. And you get stuff like all the nice movies that came out this year. And that's why I said some people that tried making hard, serious movies were like, man, I really wanted to make an adult film, but it kind of got shit on because a lot of the audience just wanted a popcorn film. And you make what you make, right? But you
Right.
definitely
Yep.
see that unless you were Canon Films that said, yeah, this is how we're going to do it. We're going to pay a very little for a script and make it a B movie action film, but you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
There was definitely some misses. The Thing was one of those from the year before, and I agree with you. Return is a popcorn film. I don't know if it's the best popcorn film of the year because there's a lot of good ones, but it's very
Right.
solid. But I do agree with Marania and Chat that I think it's the weakest of the three. Scarface is one of those movies you have to see once. Yeah, you probably have seen Return of the Jedi. Who in here, Chat, hasn't? Most people have probably seen
Right.
Scarface.
Yeah.
But if you're younger and it's a toss-up and you're like, well,
Yeah.
I got to see all the original Star Wars and look at all the original stuff, I'm telling you, Scarface is a
Yeah.
gem. Brian De Palma makes fantastic films. They're so stylistic, and I just think Scarface is better. I do. So the
Yeah.
Thunderdome, we tried to think of the best film to put up against Return. We came up with Scarface because I thought it's the only one that's got a chance. And I'm going to go out there and say you got to pick Scarface out of these two.
Yeah, I'm looking at the original Howard Hughes Scarface from the 30s, which was banned because this movie is kind of loosely based off that movie from the 30s,
Yeah.
and because of the violence, same thing, same type of character, and this movie is Tony Montana is basically kind of loosely also based off of Al Capone as well.
Yep.
The gangsters.
Do you know how he got the name Montana? I'm glad you asked and didn't, actually.
Yeah, he's actually from Montana.
As everybody knows here, we're the host of Rob's Redskins Review, currently on hiatus, but looking to maybe come back at some point here now that Snyder's.
Oh, he's ready to Joe. That's why.
Joe Gibbs got hired, I think it was in 80 or 81, and they won 3 Super Bowls, over those 12 years, and had the best team ever in the NFL, as well as the best coach ever. And so there was one team, though, that was slightly better. It was not the Cowboys or the Steelers. It was the San Francisco 49ers. They had a guy from Notre Dame who Joe Theismann went to, but I think it was pre-Theismann or post-Theismann. I think it probably was. That was Joe Montana. And so he's a big fan of him. So it's like, I'll call him Tony Montana. And it sounds kind of silly, but Montana, you think of the great Midwest and all that, right? Open sky country or whatever. I'm like, that name always stuck with me. I never realized that until a few years ago, reading an interview or something, and going, oh, I didn't realize because Joe Montana was the man. You never hear him talk about winning 4 Super Bowls, but basically, over the same time period in the 80s, probably the best decade for football as well as basketball. You had the 49ers with Montana quarterbacking, and then you had the Redskins were probably 1B to them because they won 3 Super Bowls in terms of franchises. And so, again, associating people with winners, like in Wall Street, Michael Douglas would say, based off of Pat Riley, who I think played with Chamberlain back when he was a Laker, and then, of course, coached the Showtime Lakers in the 80s, winning 5 titles and whatnot. So sometimes there are other cultural references to these movies that are significant, because if you're Scarface, what do you think of? Oh, fuck, he's a badass man. But you go, he's a man, and he's a made man, and most importantly, a self-made man. He was not a blue blood where he inherited the shit. That was always frowned upon, and that was the northern liberal elites, the people that had all that came down south here. There's a big difference between making it on your own versus being handed to you.
Also, Star Wars had a huge cult by this time, and as you look at this movie, I was looking at the returns for this. Budget of between $32.5 and $42.7 million. This is for Return of the Jedi. Returned with $482 million.
Yeah.
This was a character, just a movie, standalone. Between 25 and 37 million. Came back with 66. I would say that's a good movie. I wouldn't say it's a great movie, but I'm saying it earned its money back. And it doesn't need a sequel. Basically, there's no way you could do a sequel. But honestly, though, like I said, these are 2 different movies, and not just alone the fact that is one's on the left, one's on the right. They're different genres, and we were trying to find a movie that goes up against Return of the Jedi. Now we could, it's impossible, but we could have basically just went, what? How about we just do this? We don't talk about Return of the Jedi for 1983, and then totally ignore it, and then something else. Now we may do that in the future, but I want to see if there is a movie that could go up against Return of the Jedi. I want to say that Scarface is the movie. Nowadays. I'm curious to see Gen Zs, if they watch either one of these, which ones they would actually go for.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing that would happen in the 80s too. You had a few people that would write columns or sometimes be on TV, like Ebert and Siskel and all that.
Yeah,
they're at the movies, and something else I think was called Before or After that, and we would watch them. I think Joe Bob Briggs even wrote a column. We had a local guy, so it was always interesting. Come Wednesday, Thursday, where they would write about a couple movies that were coming out the weekend. You'd see what was coming out. You knew ahead of time, and so you'd get excited and pumped up to go see them. But it was also a time where once you got to know how they wrote, what they liked and didn't, you could kind of judge on whether you'd like it or not. So that's kind of cool too, right? Like
Hmm.
what you and I like doesn't matter to everybody else, but it might point out ways that people might look at it and go, "Oh, I understand what they like, so this is what they say, so I might check this out or I might not." And that's why we do this because it's fun.
Yes, and
But
honest,
people used that soapbox in the 80s to really start openly bashing movies. And Scarface is one that got shit on a bit because, again, I think everybody wanted these popcorn, nice to eat films, and it was like so removed from reality with how the 70s went and all that
yeah,
stuff too. And we talked about Bronson and Death Wish, and you could talk about Carpenter being a bedwetting liberal or whatever term you want to use, but his was always pretty cynical and dark and had a sense of humor to me, a lot of them. But Scarface is not a drug movie, just like
no,
Rocky's not a boxing movie.
no,
Okay, and so I think your initial comment about that is 100% right. And I think I wonder, to your point, if younger people saw that, if they would recognize it, because Scarface is associated with Salem, my friend, blah 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 blah, boom 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 boom, pew
yeah.
pew 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 pew, snorting coke. And kids don't understand how big coke was back in the 80s. They don't.
Oh, it's still a big deal today as
Yeah.
far as drugs are being pushed. No, they're being caught. It's just that it's TV
If
kind of
you're cool,
plays
you
down.
did coke. If you're a loser, you did crack. I mean, let's be honest.
Yes, yes. There was always people doing bumps in the nightclubs. Yes, yeah. So like I said, you like I said, just watch Miami Vice, and Miami Vice is pretty much accurate to what was going on down in there. Um, they were
I want to
using
throw one more thing in there too, just because you brought it up.
what's that?
When you talk about drugs in Miami, and Oliver Stone, had pretty good opinions about things. Same with John Milius. But the thing I want to get to with drugs is that in a roundabout way, and I think you would start seeing this a little bit later,
Hmm.
and forgetting Republicans, Democrats, conservative liberals, whatever, it really was becoming an anti-government kind of situation because you could argue that the drug trade in the United States and around the world is fostered mainly by governments. And so you could argue about like the opium wars in China and how it turned into, the cocaine and poppy fields and stuff like that with Vietnam or Korean War or
Hmm.
anything since then. You could talk about how it goes on now. People argue about the fentanyl crisis. Well, it's only a crisis if you take it, really. So, I mean, in the 80s, cocaine was the thing. And of course, third world countries coming up to here because a lot of third world countries who were not communists turned communists. So what could people do? Well, they could run drugs because otherwise you had no ability to do anything. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but it's taken the moonshining back in the 20s and 30s. You
Right.
restrict it, becomes more popular, that sort of thing. So it sounds like a libertarian argument. But again, this movie's not a drug movie, but it's a great background because it was so there in the 80s. That's when
Well, yeah.
mules became a thing and talked about, not in the 90s or 2000s.
You
They've been
you
around
know what
forever.
you'd probably compare this today? Today's version of this would be Tulsa King with the weed business. How weed, he uses that. Nobody
But
uses.
but that's
Yeah,
supposedly legitimate in a way,
yeah,
right? They make it so
yeah,
lighthearted, right? But
yeah,
nobody
yeah.
did that.
He's better now. Stallone's character is a lot better than I'd say Scarface is, but that's the big dealers now. Now it's marijuana. Now the fact is that it's even illegal in some parts. So sure, yeah, that's how criminals get around that. Oh well, yeah. We'll get somebody who actually has a license. He'll sell it for them, and then they said they'll just use it as a front. It's so much easier to move marijuana than it is to try to move kilos of cocaine and stuff. But as we saw in movies like what was it, Beverly Hills Cop, the coffee grinds, and they said
Yep.
it's just so. Why would you want to waste your time shipping in stuff and hiding in coffee grinds when you can just grow it right here, and the government allows you like it is yeah, they're idiots. It's like it's like, well, we have regulations. No, you don't have regulations. You don't really pay attention to it. It's like, and if it's on like Native Americans property reservations, you don't have jurisdiction over there. No.
You know,
Um,
not until I would say seriously. I mean, people did Valley Girl talk because it was a thing in the early 80s, right? And that was kind of
mhm,
whatever, but it died out pretty quick.
yeah.
But not until Jim Carrey came out with um, Ace Ventura and would talk that way he would talk, alrighty then, and all that stuff. I have not heard one movie more imitated where, like, if I start talking like Jim Carrey, you might, and then you just go into Jim Carrey mode, right? And
Yeah.
just everything's like, well, excuse me, and you just, all the phrases start coming out, you start talking to him and walk. It's just one of those things. But the one movie before that was Scarface, so people would be like, do you want to fuck with me, man?
Yeah, he's like,
Would do that. And it was so funny. Like, if I start doing it, you would try to do it too. And
yeah.
it was fun to do it. But here's the thing. Everything in there is intentional. De Palma's an incredible filmmaker. Here's a movie that, how do I say it? You could say it's a cynical movie with the ending. I don't mind that. But here's another cynical movie that people think of as a nicer ending, and that would be The Jerk with Steve Martin. Rags to riches, come from nothing, make something of yourself. It's got all the
walks away with something, at least semi-decent.
Yeah, he makes an idea that just kind of comes to him, makes a lot of money. He
learns from it.
This guy loses everything at the end.
Yeah,
it's incredible. The Jerk is phenomenal.
and Charlton Heston's in it too, so it's even a bonus.
Charlton Heston's in what movie?
In The Jerk.
Is he?
No, I'm just kidding. He's in the Wayne's World too.
Right, Wayne's World too. But I never thought of it, but The Jerk was on the other end. I forgot how great of a film that is. But again, people like watching those rags to riches, and that's what Scarface is.
Yeah,
okay, they're going to be good guys at the end. Okay, let me eat my popcorn and watch these animatronic figures battle.
Scarface, like I said, all the way through the fight scenes, everything with the guns of, it's cool. Like I said, that end thing, everybody was mad. He's got the big old guns. Like, you gonna fuck with me? I'm gonna fuck with you. It's like, it's like, say hello to my little friend. Like, and he just starts shooting everything. And it's just like, this guy is so high on cocaine. He's not thinking straight. He's just firing off. He's got all that ammunition, kills a bunch of guys, but then like, he knows he's gonna die. So he's gonna take out as many as he can. His sister's dead, and like, it's like everything, his whole entire life is now burning down. Michelle Pfeiffer, who plays his girlfriend or wife, I don't remember if she was or whatever, but she survives. She leaves with their kid, so she was the smart one. She actually survived this, but everyone else on that, it just gets wiped out. And like I said, it's I wouldn't say it's a depressing ending. Well, only if you're looking at him from a humanitarian point of view. This is the guy who had everything.
They got what was coming,
but got what was coming.
Ending.
Yeah, and it's if
Lenny got it at the end of A Mice and Men.
Had he survived and got away with it, if anything, that encourages people watching this. Hey, maybe I can get away with it too. It's more realistic, the fact that he didn't get away with it. Same with Walter White. And as I'm saying, now for I'm sorry for anybody who hasn't watched Breaking Bad yet, but now like just saying, yeah, and Walter could actually take a minute. Walter White could have got away with it, but if it was this damn freaking Jesse. But anyway, yeah. So like I said, this is a very more a moralistic story, basically. If you're gonna live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you're gonna be a criminal, you're gonna die as a criminal.
Yep.
There was he didn't reprint his way. He got worse as he gained more power. And what's the one thing you do if you're a seller? You don't sample the product.
No.
And he can't
you don't sample it. That's right.
Yeah.
You're a pimp, you don't sample your ladies. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
exactly.
You might break them in, but that's it.
You push it to the limit, and that's it. You don't sample it. But honestly, though, that song "Push It to the Limit," I can't remember. I'm not sure how high it went on the charts, but damn, that comes out of Walmart of all places. I'm like, shit. I love this song. That's like we talk about movie songs. Like you just want to just driving, drive your Ferrari or your sports car and just put the pedal to the metal all the way down. We think of like Rocky. I think it's Rocky 4. There's no easy way out, where he's driving in the car.
Yeah.
Push it to the limit is another one of those. You just want to just put, just want to speed and you're on, or it's just or Freebird. That's the other one by Leonard Skinner. When it gets going, like these songs just amp you up. And ironically, though, Push It to the Limit amps you up, and it's about a cocaine dealer that's on cocaine. So it's like, wow, it's even more crazy to think about. But But I gotta say though, Scarface it's a very good movie. It's at least a one or two watch. If you've never seen it, you need to watch it. It should be on your bucket list.
Yeah.
Um, Return of the Jedi, you're only gonna watch it because you watched the first two. You want to see how it ends. And dear God, could this whole movie, if they could have just, I didn't need to see the whole Wookiee planet.
I didn't either.
No, it didn't need it whatsoever. I was like, oh, cool. They live in trees. Oh, what are they, monkeys? I don't care. If I want to watch people living in trees, I'll go watch Robinson
I wonder if
Crusoe.
Cameron ripped them off for his Avatar stuff, like he ripped off the Terminator.
Who knows?
Yeah,
Actually,
it's here's the thing with Scarface. It's people would get this on VHS, and people were very deliberate about what movies they would get, and not all movies were immediately available for a long time. So I clearly, distinctly remember a bunch of Italians I knew in the '90s, mid '90s, ape shit over this movie, right? I mean, and you just you fall in these crowds, right? But there was definitely around 2000 or so when DVD started coming out. Scarface, it got a second life. And I've talked about this briefly with the secondary markets, how that became a thing, especially like with Canon Films or B action stars from the 80s going into the 90s. And that was legitimate. And Scarface seemed to get a rebirth. And of course, it was huge in hip hop culture for a long time, might still be, I don't know. He is an idol for people to look up to because, right or wrong, he did it his way, which is really important. And even though I've heard many times that Sinatra hated that song, people love that friggin' song, especially Italians. Why? Because it's that whole thing of individuality and doing it epitomizes the American dream. Hey, I may not make it. I may only make it for a little bit and then flame out, but it's up for me to do it. And I think that was really strong in the track. And in the 80s, you have your montages. This movie is one of the beginnings of those things. You have excess whatever, drugs, booze, fuel, partying, you name it. People today on Instagram, OnlyFans think like they party hard and all that. I look at that stuff and go, I didn't party hard. But I look at some of these guys and go, oh, yeah, you're really not partying.
bottom line, if you love Grand Theft Auto, this is a movie you need to watch.
Absolutely. Scarface is
and then go play Grand Theft Auto Vice City after that.
Rip Return of the Jedi. We should probably create some sort of graphic of all the movies that lose and are dead to the other film.
Honestly, my next thing I want to do is take the movies that people don't like. I said, like, if you guys can go watch the original movies, the reviews we did. We're in episode 4 now. Go back 1 through 3. Tell us to know which movie you like better.
Which one wins?
Yeah, because we're gonna take the losers and we're gonna have the losers face off against each other probably.
Yeah, so we can have double losers.
So let us know which one wins.
Gotcha.
For this down in the comment section down below. Yes. There you go. Scarface, Al Pacino, Oliver Stone movie. A little more serious, much more. I don't know if it won any awards or probably got nominated for whatever, but like you said, he got shit on, so probably nothing. Got snubbed. Star Wars, popcorn flick, meant for the kids. Really blew up. Obviously, you could say Star Wars would probably win. That's my speculation. For me, though, being more like I'm older now, I want to say Scarface because
Scarface will win.
Yeah, for me.
Yeah, I
yeah.
think this is the first one we agreed on, but I'd have to go back and look because I don't think we did with last week's. But the whole reason why we do the Thunderdome too is be divisive. It's kind of preview, get your appetite wet about what we're doing on Sundays now, which is going through, which will be 1983. We're going to pick out 10 films to talk about. These may or may not be on it. They probably will be, but we're going to talk about some runner-ups, and we're going to go through each of those too and give a preview for it. And then, of course, the week after that, a week from now, we'll be doing 1984. Obviously, when you guys look at the list of 83 movies, I'm sure you'll be very familiar with some of you guys. It's going to be a bunch of nice movies or whatever. We put some interesting ones on there and some ones and all that maybe we have talked about or maybe we haven't before in the past. But it's been getting a bit more engagement. We enjoy doing it. It's a lot of fun. We let more people watch, and we appreciate you guys letting other people know we exist. The best thing you do is obviously share time with us. That's always nice there too. That really makes the time go fast. It makes it a lot of fun too. We don't have to go and, oh, this is woke or this sucks or this is, and we don't. That's not what we want to talk about. But man, Scarface, tremendous. Return of the Jedi, very solid, very good film, merchandising movie. I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to say anything too much negative about it. But out of these two, Scarface walks out. It's the sequel we always wanted to Scarface. There you go.
Yes, Scarface the video game was supposed to get a sequel in 2009, but it got canceled.
Don't remake Scarface, please don't.
No.
I'm just saying that publicly.
I'm talking about the video game.
I know.
It was supposed to be a sequel to it.
There was a sequel to the movie. It was called Vice City 3, right?
It's because it's called Vice City.
That's where it came from, right? Say goodbye to my little friend. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a good night. Good night now.
See you later, guys.